The year was 1888, and the Arizona Territory was a vast, unforgiving crucible. The relentless sun beat down from a sky bleached white, baking the earth until it cracked and exhaled a fine, choking dust that coated every surface and burned in the back of the throat. The rhythmic, almost hypnotic clack-clack-clack of the Spirit of the West train, once a symbol of progress and hope, was slowly, agonizingly giving way to a strained metallic wheeze. Inside car A12, the air was thick and stagnant, heavy with the scent of sweat, fear, and the metallic tang of overheating machinery. Silas Vance, a young, meticulous engineer barely into his 20s, ran a calloused thumb over the cool, polished silver of his father's pocket watch. It was a finely crafted piece, its steady ticking a comforting counterpoint to the growing unease in the train. It was his anchor, a symbol of the precision and order he believed in, the very antithesis of the chaotic wilderness outside. He meticulously checked the pressure gauges, his sharp eyes scanning for any anomaly, but the needle quivered erratically, signaling a deep, systemic problem. Suddenly, the door to the compartment was flung open, and conductor Jedediah "Jed" Stone, a man whose broad shoulders seemed to carry the weight of every mile of track laid across the West, practically filled the entrance. His face, usually a study in grizzled stoicism, was now a mask of grim urgency, lines of worry etched deeper than usual around his eyes. "Silas!" he barked, his voice rough with alarm. "We've got a catastrophic failure. The boiler's boiling over, spitting steam like a dying beast. We're losing speed faster than a tumbleweed in a gale, and the next watering hole, Whispering Pines, is at least 50 miles through that cursed stretch of track they call the Devil's Backbone Pass. If we don't get water, and soon, she's going to seize up for good." A wave of palpable dread rippled through the already anxious passengers. Ilara, a young woman with a face smudged with worry, desperately fanned her small son Thomas, whose labored breaths were barely audible over the growing groans of the engine. His skin was alarmingly flushed, hot to the touch, and his small body convulsed with an occasional weak cough. Old Man Hemlock, a weathered prospector clutching a worn leather-bound Bible to his chest, began to murmur prayers under his breath, his eyes wide with a quiet, ancient fear. Silas felt the suffocating weight of their collective hope and despair pressing down on him. He'd seen the aftermath of train disasters, the mangled wreckage, the shattered lives, the unyielding desolation of the desert consuming all. He knew what "seize up for good" truly meant out here. The sun outside was no longer just a light source. It was a malevolent, inescapable entity, a giant fiery eye glaring down, baking the iron tracks until they shimmered like liquid in the oppressive heat. The vast, indifferent desert stretched to the horizon, an endless expanse of ochre and sand, mocking their vulnerability. Silas, despite his frantic efforts, every trick, every bit of engineering knowledge he possessed, found himself powerless. He doused the firebox, bled steam, but the engine groaned, wheezed, coughed a final asthmatic shudder, and then, with a profound metallic sigh that seemed to echo the death rattle of their hopes, it died. The Spirit of the West shuddered to a complete, terrifying halt, its sudden stillness more deafening, more terrifying than any screech of brakes. A profound, suffocating silence descended, broken only by the whimpering of the child and the desperate sighs of the adults. Desperation, a thick, acrid presence, settled over them, like a funeral shroud. The dwindling water barrels were already dangerously low, the meager food supplies seemed to evaporate in the heat, and the temperature inside the cars was becoming unbearable, a relentless adversary against human endurance. Silas stared at his father's watch, its steady, oblivious tick, a cruel, mocking counterpoint to the grim, stagnant reality unfolding around them. He could already feel the cold trickle of sweat turning to icy dread down his spine, a premonition of failure in the sweltering heat. His mind, usually a fortress of logic and solutions, felt trapped, suffocated by the immensity of the problem and the vast, empty land around them. As the merciless sun climbed higher, hours bled into an agonizing eternity. Each minute stretched, distended by the oppressive heat and the gnawing uncertainty. The metallic skin of the train became a scorching furnace, radiating heat back into the already sweltering air. Thirst became a dull ache, then a sharp, insistent demand. Whispers of "we're done for" and "no way out" began to slither through. The parched air growing louder, more desperate, eroding the last vestiges of hope. Silas, his face grimed with soot and sweat, his once neat hair now plastered to his forehead, was making one last, desperate, almost futile attempt to coax life back into the dead engine. He meticulously checked the valves, prodded the boiler, his fingers, usually so precise, trembling slightly with exhaustion and mounting despair. He was about to concede defeat when he saw him. Through the shimmering heat haze, a figure emerged from the stark landscape, seemingly rising from the very earth itself. He stood quietly, a respectful distance from the train, under the inadequate skeletal shade of a gnarled mesquite tree. It was an elderly Navajo man. His face, a profound tapestry of deep, etched wrinkles, seemed to hold the silent wisdom of centuries, and his eyes, dark and knowing, were like pools of polished obsidian, reflecting the endless sky. He wore simple, almost threadbare buckskin clothing that seemed to melt into the ochre landscape, a natural extension of the earth itself, and a single, unadorned turquoise pendant hung from his neck, a vibrant splash of color against his weathered skin, catching the harsh glint of the sun. He watched the struggling, desperate passengers, his gaze calm, unwavering, yet filled with an ancient understanding that seemed to pierce through their immediate despair to see something deeper, driven by a raw, primal instinct that bypassed his usual logical reasoning, a desperate, almost irrational glimmer of hope. Silas stumbled towards him, his boots crunching loudly on the sun-baked earth. "Excuse me, sir," he began, his voice hoarse, dry from the dust and gnawing anxiety. "Our train is broken down. We're stranded. We have sick passengers. Do you know anything about this land? Any hidden springs? Any water sources that aren't on the maps? Any way out of this hell?" The elder remained silent for a long, profound moment, his gaze unwavering, taking in Silas's agitated face, the desperation in his eyes, before his gaze shifted deliberately, slowly, to the silver pocket watch glinting on Silas's vest, catching the harsh sunlight. A glint of something unreadable passed through his dark eyes. "This land speaks," the elder finally said, his voice a low, resonant rumble, surprisingly strong and clear for his apparent age. "But it does not give easily. You seek water, yes, but you seek something more, something you carry, something that tells you time." He extended a gnarled, weathered hand, slowly, deliberately, gesturing towards the watch. Silas, confused by the unexpected request, hesitated. This watch wasn't just a timepiece. It was his last tangible link to his father, a symbol of his ambition, his future, a constant reminder of the world of precision and order he believed in. It was a piece of his world, a world of steam and gears and predictable movements. Giving it up felt like giving up a part of himself. But what was a watch worth if they all perished here? He looked back at the thirsty, frightened faces on the train, at the feverish child coughing weakly, his small body racked with tremors. Then he looked at the elder's knowing, unwavering eyes, eyes that seemed to hold ancient knowledge. The silence stretched, heavy with unspoken meaning, the sun beating down, a silent judge. With a profound, almost spiritual sense of surrender, a deep exhalation of his own pride and certainty, Silas unhooked the watch from its chain. The cool silver warmed in his palm for a fleeting moment. Then, with a tremor of finality, he placed it into the elder's palm. The elder's fingers, surprisingly firm and warm, closed around it, almost tenderly. A faint, almost imperceptible smile, full of ancient wisdom and a hint of something resembling gentle amusement, touched his lips. "Wisdom," the elder said, his eyes now fixed directly on Silas, holding his gaze with an unnerving intensity, "is not always found in speed, young one. Sometimes it is found in understanding, in patience, in listening to what the land truly offers. It is a gift given, not taken." He then turned slowly, his movements unhurried and deliberate, and began to walk away from the train, towards the vast, silent, seemingly empty desert, gesturing for Silas and Jed to follow. The elder, whose name Silas learned was Hatali, a word that resonated with ancient sacred meaning in his tongue, singer or healer, didn't speak much during their arduous trek. His lessons were conveyed through silent gestures, the direction of his gaze, and the profound way he interacted with the earth. He didn't lead them directly to a gushing spring, a miraculous oasis in the stark wilderness. Instead, he guided them to a barely visible fissure in a cluster of jagged, sun-baked rocks, a place so unassuming Silas would have walked past it 100 times without noticing. Here, in cool, shaded pockets, dew had collected, condensing from the night air, enough to wet their parched lips and offer a fleeting, yet profound sense of relief. It wasn't a solution to their water crisis, but a vital reprieve, a small, yet significant victory against the vastness of their despair. Hatali then motioned for Silas and conductor Jed to follow him, leading them away from the immediate vicinity of the stalled train, deeper into a landscape that Silas had only ever perceived as desolate, hostile, and devoid of life. As they walked, Hatali pointed to various plants, his gnarled fingers tracing their leaves, his voice a low, melodic murmur as he explained their properties in sparse guttural English, his movements precise and deliberate. He spoke of the coyote willow, its supple yet tough fibers perfect for binding, stronger than rope. He crushed the leaves of the creosote bush between his fingers, releasing its pungent medicinal scent, explaining how its oils could lubricate seized parts or soothe burns. He spoke of how the wind, usually a bearer of dust and heat, also carried whispers of unseen pathways, of shifting sands and hidden dangers. He explained how the ancient rocks absorbed the sun's fury during the day and slowly released its warmth at night, a constant, subtle energy. He taught them that true strength didn't come from brute force or rigid plans, but from an inner quiet, from listening, from understanding the subtle rhythms of the earth, from adapting to its demands rather than fighting them. Silas, initially skeptical, his engineer's mind accustomed to blueprints, calculations, and the predictable mechanics of steel and steam, listened intently, his perceptions slowly, undeniably shifting. He realized Hatali wasn't just showing them a path. He was teaching them to see the land in a completely different way, to interpret the myriad, subtle signs that were always there, hidden in plain sight from his conventional, limited gaze. Hatali led them to a nearby grove of gnarled, seemingly unremarkable mesquite trees. He showed them how to identify and cut the sturdy, heat-resistant wood that could be used as temporary shoring for the weakened, buckling tracks ahead, a notorious stretch that Silas had always deemed too unstable, too dangerous for a full-speed passage. He demonstrated with surprising agility how to meticulously chip away at certain points along the rails, explaining how to harness the subtle thermal expansion and contraction of the steel itself with strategic adjustments, easing the pressure points that had led to the engine's initial failure. Conductor Jed, practical and notoriously cynical, a man who believed only in what he could touch and see, was surprisingly receptive to the elder's unorthodox insights. His ingrained skepticism slowly gave way to a grudging, then open admiration. "Never thought of the land as a teacher, Silas," he mumbled, wiping sweat from his brow with a grimy hand. "But some of his notions, they make a strange, damn good kind of sense." With Hatali's quiet, almost imperceptible guidance, and the combined grueling effort of Silas, Jed, and a few of the more able-bodied passengers, Old Man Hemlock, surprisingly spry, even helping. Despite his advanced age, they began to make rudimentary, desperate repairs. They stripped bark, fashioned crude wedges from the tough mesquite, and adjusted the rails with improvised tools, their hands raw and blistered. The heat was still oppressive, the work back-breaking. Each swing of the hammer an immense effort, but a renewed, tenacious sense of purpose, ignited by Hatali's calm assurance and the glimmer of a possible, unconventional solution, slowly, stubbornly, began to replace the earlier soul-crushing despair. Ilara, watching from the train window, clutching her feverish son, saw the subtle but profound shift in energy, a fragile flicker of hope igniting in the weary, determined faces of the men. The makeshift repairs were crude, a testament to raw desperation and the elders' ancient unconventional wisdom, rather than textbook engineering perfection. They were a precarious patchwork of mesquite wood and repositioned steel, but Silas knew in his gut that they were enough. As the sun began its slow, majestic descent, painting the western sky in an explosion of fiery oranges, deep purples, and fading rose hues that bled into the horizon, Silas, his muscles aching with a profound exhaustion but his spirit subtly renewed, climbed back into the engine. He gripped the cold iron of the throttle, a mix of trepidation and newfound confidence surging through him. He cranked the engine. It sputtered, coughed violently, a plume of acrid smoke erupting from the smokestack, then, with a profound groan that seemed to shake the very foundations of the train, a defiant hiss of steam and a shudder that vibrated through the floorboards, it slowly, miraculously, lurched forward. A collective gasp, then a raw, guttural, triumphant cheer erupted from the passengers. Faces once etched with despair now split into wide, disbelieving smiles. The spirit of the West, battered, limping but undeniably alive, began its slow, deliberate crawl across the challenging, previously impassable Devil's Backbone Pass. Every reluctant clack of the wheels on the mended tracks was a small, hard one. Victory, a testament to what could be achieved when rigid thinking was abandoned for adaptable ingenuity. Silas, his face streaked with grease, soot, and the sweat of exertion, felt a profound sense of relief washing over him, a physical lightness replacing the crushing weight of responsibility. But beneath it, a deeper, more profound understanding began to settle. He instinctively reached for the empty spot on his vest where his father's polished silver watch had been. He hadn't just traded a timepiece, he had traded a symbol of linear progress, of man's attempt to conquer and control. Time for the cyclical, timeless wisdom of the land itself. He had traded a piece of his old self, his rigid certainty, for a new perspective, one that valued observation, patience, and a deep, empathetic connection to the natural world over rigid schedules and predictable mechanics. As they slowly, painstakingly approached the next town, a small, dusty outpost that shimmered like a mirage, now a genuine oasis in the fading light, Hatali, quietly, almost imperceptibly, slipped away from the train. He merged with the lengthening shadows, his form dissolving into the vast, silent desert once more, a ghost of wisdom returning to the earth. Silas never saw him again, but his presence, his quiet, profound wisdom, resonated deeply within him, an echo that would shape his future. The train, though battered, delayed, and scarred by its ordeal, arrived safely. Young Thomas, pale but breathing steadily, received proper medical attention and slowly but surely began to recover, a small testament to the perseverance of those on board. The entire harrowing experience had fundamentally changed Silas Vance. He still valued efficiency and the precision of engineering. They were the bedrock of his profession. But he now carried a deeper, almost spiritual respect for the subtle, powerful forces of nature and the quiet, profound wisdom of those who truly understood it, those who listened to the whispers of the earth. The incident became a whispered legend among the railroad men, a tale of the spirit of the West, the train that was saved not by speed, not by brute force, but by a timely halt, a selfless exchange, and the unspoken guidance of a Navajo elder. Silas Vance, the young engineer, had learned that sometimes the most valuable lessons were not found in books or diagrams or the cold logic of machines, but in the quiet, profound wisdom of the land and its people, a wisdom more timeless, more profound, and ultimately more valuable than any ticking clock.